The first story comes from Glyn Johns, an esteemed engineer and producer. He was trying to bring together the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Bob Dylan in some kind of mad supergroup. In his 2014 autobiography, Soundman, Johns detailed his 1969 plan to pull the best material from Mick and Keith, Paul and John, Bob and George, and then select the best rhythm section from the two bands to suit whichever songs we were cutting. And according to Rolling Stone magazine, the idea originated from Bob Dylan. He admired Johns' work and asked him to approach the Rolling Stones and the Beatles to work on some sort of collaborative project. Johns revealed that while Keith Richards and George Harrison were enthusiastic, John Lennon, Paul McCartney and Mick Jagger were firmly against the idea. Years later, Dylan did get to collaborate with Harrison in the supergroup The Travelling Wilburys, which also included Jeff Lynne, Roy Orbison and Tom Petty. Now next is probably the supergroup that came closest to forming. They even had a name, XYZ, which stood for X Yes Zeppelin. In 1980, after the death of drummer John Bonham, Led Zeppelin stopped functioning as a band. That same year, a chance meeting between Zeppelin guitarist Jimmy Page and Yes bassist and keyboardist Chris Squire sparked the idea for a new band. Squire brought in fellow Yes member Alan White on drums, and the group was rounded out by former Greenslade keyboardist Dave Lawson. They needed a lead vocalist, so they approached Zeppelin's Robert Plant. While Plant did attend a rehearsal, he ultimately chose not to commit. Interestingly, the band did record some material, and it appeared in altered forms on Yes's future albums. But will those original tapes ever be released? Well, Jimmy Page revealed in an interview that he finds it highly unlikely. They'll probably be buried forever. Next up, in a 2016 interview with the Orange County Register, country music star Dwight Yoakam revealed that an Elvis Presley album produced by David Bowie almost came to fruition. The story unfolds with Yoakam meeting Bowie after a show in LA. Bowie had apparently shared a surprising story from 1977 with Yoakam, and this was just months before Presley's death. Presley had called Bowie to discuss the possibility of having Bowie produce his next album. Bowie, a longtime fan of Elvis, was enthusiastic about the idea. Unfortunately, due to Presley's declining health, the project never materialized. There is some precedent for this potential collaboration as well. In 1975, Elvis Presley's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, invited Bowie to write a song for Elvis. Bowie submitted the now classic Golden Years, which Presley reportedly declined. Interestingly as well, Bowie and Presley share the same birthday, January the 8th. Next, this is one of the most well-documented what-if scenarios in music history. A telegram sent to Paul McCartney from Jimi Hendrix, Miles Davis and Tony Williams has been publicly displayed worldwide. Dated October 22, 1969, it reads, "We are recording an LP together this weekend. How about coming in to play bass? Stop. Call Alan Douglas, 212-581-2212. Peace. Jimi Hendrix, Miles Davis, Tony Williams." I mean, Davis working with Williams and Hendrix is amazing enough. Add Paul McCartney, you take it to a whole new level. Whether McCartney would have been a good fit during the late 60s remains a mystery, as he was on vacation and unable to respond. This was the year that Davis released In a Silent Way, his groundbreaking electro-jazz rock album, and just months before his revolutionary Bitches Brew, which pushed the boundaries of rock and jazz. Meanwhile, the Beatles had just completed recording their final masterpiece, Abbey Road. Williams would later become one of the pioneers of jazz fusion and drumming, and Hendrix was sadly only a few months away from his tragic death. Next up is one of the most unusual prospective supergroups, which involves the early formation of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, ELP, in 1970. Greg Lake, formerly of King Crimson, and Keith Emerson, formerly of The Nice, were assembling their new band when they considered an unexpected addition. The Jimi Hendrix Experience had recently disbanded, and Lake discussed joining forces with Mitch Mitchell, Hendrix's former drummer. In 2012, Lake shared that it was Mitchell who suggested involving Hendrix. However, two significant events then occurred. Lake and Emerson met drummer Carl Palmer, previously with Atomic Rooster and the Crazy World of Arthur Brown, and Hendrix of course tragically passed away. ELP went on to achieve great success, releasing 7 studio albums before disbanding in 1979, and of course reuniting for 2 more in the early 90s. Just think, in an alternate reality we might have seen Hendrix, Emerson, Lake and Mitchell, dubbed Helm rather than the mythical Help. Now this one is intriguing. Two iconic personalities who share as many differences as they do similarities. Both born in 1958, Michael Jackson and Prince were heavily influenced by James Brown and the classic Motown and Stax soul sounds. Jackson released his first solo album in 1972, but had been recording with the Jackson 5 since 1969. Prince's debut came 6 years later. Though they shared musical roots, their styles diverged dramatically. Jackson leaned towards polished pop and sentimental ballads, while Prince ventured into rock, new wave, hip-hop and jazz. By 1987, Jackson was one of the most famous personalities on the planet. Prince, although well-established, was arguably less prominent. Legendary composer and producer Quincy Jones invited Prince to collaborate with Jackson on the song Bad. The two did meet at Jackson's house, but Prince eventually declined the offer. Speaking to Chris Rock in 1977, Prince said it was more to do with the material rather than Jackson as a person. Now, sticking with Michael Jackson, at the height of his fame, he had the luxury of choosing any collaborator he desired. One proposed project was with Freddie Mercury in 1983. Jackson, of course, was riding high on the success of the previous year's album Thriller, and Queen at this point were transitioning into a more mainstream, radio-friendly sound. The two icons met when Jackson attended a Queen concert, as documented in a 1983 interview, and they later began working on demos together. And it's unclear whether these demos were meant for a Queen album or a Michael Jackson album or some kind of collaboration project. What we do know is that 3 tracks were recorded in Jackson's home studio. There Must Be More to Life Than This, State of Shock, and Victory. Of these, only There Must Be More to Life Than This has been officially released, appearing on the 2014 Queen Forever compilation album. Now, the reason for this collaboration never coming to fruition is ultimately unknown, but Freddie Mercury always said it was because of hectic schedules. And, fun fact, during this period, Michael Jackson encouraged Queen to release Another One Bites the Dust as a single. They weren't thinking of doing this previously. So they took Michael Jackson's advice, and lo and behold, it topped the charts and became their best-selling single of all time. Next, Kurt Cobain's admiration for R.e.m., especially their 1992 album Automatic for the People, was no secret. In a 1994 Rolling Stone interview, the same year Cobain passed away, he expressed, "If I could write just a couple of songs as good as what they've written, I don't know how that band does what they do. God, they're the greatest." Michael Stipe of R.e.m., who was a close friend and mentor to Cobain, was also the godfather to Cobain and Courtney Love's child. Concerned with Cobain's dependency on drugs and his depression, Stipes reached out for a collaboration project in 1994. In a 2011 article for Interview magazine, Stipe revealed, "I was doing that to try and save his life. The collaboration was me calling up as an excuse to reach out to the guy. He was in a really bad place." Stipe even sent a plane ticket and arranged a driver, but Cobain never responded. Next, Morrissey's admiration for The Jam was evident from his early days with the Smiths, whose emergence coincided with the Jam's last studio album in 1982. In a 1992 interview for Slits magazine, Morrissey remarked, "Paul Weller is, when he wants to be, a genius. Hopefully we, Paul and I, will record a duet." Now, there's this legend in the music world that Morrissey slipped a note under Paul Weller's door at a festival asking for a collaboration. But whether or not this is true remains unclear, and of course no collaboration ever materialized. Morrissey did of course cover the Jam's That's Entertainment in 1992. In a 1993 interview with Q magazine, Weller expressed a starkly different view. "Morrissey, he's too English and too white and too melancholy. I've got a bit of that, I guess, but not as much as him. Not my thing at all." And the final supergroup that almost happened, much has been written about the influence of German electronic pioneers Kraftwerk on David Bowie's music, with Bowie himself often acknowledging their impact. On his official website, there's an excerpt from an interview with Uncut where Bowie says, "My attention had been swung back to Europe with the release of Kraftwerk's Autobahn in 1974. He even recorded a tribute to Florian Schneider, V2 Schneider, for his 1977 Heroes album." Kraftwerk's Ralph Hutter responded on the same page, "That was very important for us. Bowie used to tell everyone that we were his favourite group. And in the mid-70s, the rock press used to hang on every word from his mouth. We met him when we played Dusseldorf. He was travelling by Mercedes, listening to nothing but Autobahn all the time." Rumours began to rise about a potential collaboration between Bowie and Kraftwerk. However, of course, this never came to fruition. In 2016, of course, David Bowie left us, but not before putting one final secret farewell message in his last album. You can click over here for the full video on that.